Welcome, movie fans. Thanks for joining us for episode 80 of Reading Between the Reels. If you're a new listener, we're so glad you found us. And if you've been enjoying the show, please tell someone about us, send a tweet, post to Facebook, write a review on your favorite podcast catcher, or just recommend the show to a friend. And I have to say, you guys must be doing that. And thank you so much for doing that, because our last episode on Blade Runner, featuring Dan Zayer from Coffee with Kenobi, just had 5 times as many downloads as the last episode before that. So thank you for spreading the word. I'm Craig Dickinson, and I'm joined as always by my co-hosts, Corey Heichman, Justin Eldon. What's up, fellas? How we doing tonight?
We're good. I'm here for the gathering.
Oh, so I took this a different direction. I was going to say there can be only one.
Oh.
Which means...
Oh, whoops.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I'm here for the prize.
Give me the prize. Yeah, I joked with Justin before you got on, Corey, that we should just break into 3-part harmony and sing, Princes of the Universe. But
oh my gosh,
I'm not quite ready to do that.
Oh,
if Corey doesn't do a Highlander accent this entire episode, I'm going to be upset, because we all know we never got a Highlander accent in the movie. So we might as well have it on the podcast.
So what movie are we talking
You're
about?
going to steal my best line. I got one coming. I'm telling you.
Yes. So we're talking about Highlander from 19.
Oh, sorry. We jumped the gun, guys. Sorry.
We're good. We're awesome. So let's jump right in. So, Justin, I'll start with you. Your overall thoughts on Highlander.
Wow. Here's the thing. I feel like I was really negative on our Big Trouble Little China episode, so I can't be negative on this episode. Otherwise, it just kind of becomes my thing. I really like parts of this movie. And if we're going to stay positive, I think I'll probably keep it at that. This was a movie. It had a beginning, middle, and end, and things happened.
Mm.
Yes. Those are my thoughts.
Wow. Okay. We'll dig in a little deeper specifically. Corey?
It's terrible. It's a terrible movie. It's not, you know what? I think the premise for the show is good. I think the storyline is a good story that could keep me coming in and saying, okay, I'm willing to watch a retake or a remake of this show if one's coming down the pipe. But filmed in the 80s, made in the 80s, very 80s. Writing is just kind of all over the board for me. I don't think it's that great of a story. I think it was a great try. I think this movie was made 25 years too soon. You could have made this movie after 2000 and we probably would have loved it. And I think its retcon sequel would give you a good point that, we didn't really know what we were writing here, or we just kind of passed it off to someone else. And
for audience members that don't know, you probably just found out, in case you didn't, that Corey is indeed a middle school teacher. Because the fact that he called it a bad movie while still saying it was a good try is such a teacher move.
Listen, you didn't get an A, but doggone it, you got a good try.
You gave it your all. Way to go, bud.
Revise and resubmit.
But it's Braveheart meets, I don't know what else.
Back a dumpster fire?
Yeah, it's...
Goodness sakes. Is this the second straight episode I have to be the voice of reason?
Craig, and you know what? Here's the thing. Finally, I am excited about it. Okay. This is when I watched this movie halfway through when I woke up and I said, I need to pause this and go back and kind of rewatch some stuff for soundtrack. Because Craig is the master. For anybody who's new to the show, Craig is a director genius and everything he picks up. And I thought, I can't go back and watch the rest of this show again to catch those things. I got to just do it a one time through. And we're finally at a point where we disagree on some movies, which I think is great because we all have such similar personalities and tastes and experiences. We like a lot of the same movies. It's just our last few episodes, we are finding things we don't like with each other, and that causes with each other that cause us to seriously question each other's judgments.
I am learning I have a deep-seated hatred for Craig. Like, I didn't know this before, but here we are. I'm just kidding. Well, we just started and we're still I feel like we need to circle back a little bit here.
Yeah,
No, we're
Craig,
fine.
let's hear your take on this.
Okay, I'm hoping mine's a little bit more measured. This is what I said. I think it's a really cool concept, but it's not completely executed, pun intended. Yes, it did always feel to me more like a great idea than a great movie. And I talked to Justin a little bit about this today at school, that there is a television show. There's a spin-off television show that actually is kind of more or less in the same universe as this.
With
that
Duncan
I think,
MacLeod.
Yeah, with Duncan MacLeod. Have you seen that, Corey?
I actually did watch parts of that when I was growing up.
Yeah, I think that executed the idea really, really well, because I think this kind of lends itself to long-form storytelling, especially with the flashbacks. And those guys, you can go a lot deeper into the lore, and they expanded on the universe, and it didn't try and be a big sci-fi effects heavy thing, which this didn't. I think that's the thing that was one of the weaker things in this, other than the casting, which is interesting, which we'll talk about.
But
the one Scottish guy in the movie is actually playing an Egyptian Spaniard. But that was the other thing. I was just going to say, like, the effects, the magic effects, which are probably state of the art in 1986, do not hold up at all, especially the cartoon creatures at the end during the final quickening. Those are just atrocious.
And
I think you could have gone a little less is more on some of that stuff.
You could see his cable when he's hanging from the
some of that,
the quickening.
But I will say I do enjoy the nonlinear storytelling with the flashbacks a lot, and I thought that it's Russell McKay. He's the director who's done a ton of music videos before this, a bunch of Duran Duran and some other guys. It feels, in the best possible way, I think the filmmaking feels like a music video, and I mean that as a compliment, especially when it comes to the transitions and some of the frenetic camera work. But especially the scene transitions between like the past and the present stuff, I thought were just beautifully done. It's like the best wipes outside of a Star Wars film, in my opinion.
Can I interject here? Okay,
of course.
Wait. First off, my least favorite thing about Star Wars are the wipes.
I love the wipes.
So maybe we're just going to fundamentally disagree. But I had to go back several times to make sure that how I was watching this film wasn't glitching or something. Because when we do one of the first flashbacks, or one of the first like major flashbacks that doesn't go back to his like Highlander roots, it goes back to World War II. It's like an explosion, and then the glass of the screen like breaks and fades away into the flashback, and it is so bad. It's like a PowerPoint effect from 1990. Yes. And I just thought, like, I seriously had to rewind a couple times and be like, really? Is that what they're going for? And they don't ever do anything like that at any other point. Yeah. It's just that one single wipe. Yeah, was really bad. I mean, they're all really bad, but that one was different.
Oh really my gosh, the parking garage one, the first one. Oh,
now hold on. Now I gotta say, when we get to the camera angles, I'm gonna talk. There's several things in there that are absolutely stunning views. I thought for 1980. When was this? 80 what?
86.
86.
Let's just jump in, Corey. Go.
But I do have to add real quick, Craig. You said the word frenetic. I had to Google that because I didn't know when you threw that, and that means fast or energetic in a rather wild and uncontrolled way. So for our viewers who are busy Googling that, you can come back to the show now.
English teacher. Okay. Let's dive in right into the cinematography, because I do again want to pull out some things that we thought were interesting or at least meaningful. So Corey, you said you had some ideas. We'll just start with you.
Yeah, I think on the flashbacks, they kind of threw me off because it was all of a sudden just snapped back and forth. And it was kind of, you blinked and turned around and all of a sudden you're facing, oh my gosh, now we're in Scottish Highlands. Oh my gosh, we're back to 1985 New York. And so I felt jumpy on that. But I will say this, that opening scene with they didn't have drones in 1986, right?
Darn it, Corey.
No. Or CGI filmmaking. Yeah.
That drone shot, it must have been a camera on some swivels or something. They had that camera in the WWE wrestling stadium.
I had to look this up.
It comes down, and the way it sweeps across the crowd, you would have swore that was filmed right now with a drone, a beautiful shot coming over the ring, over the fans. You see people's cameras flashing. I'm going like this. Sorry. Nobody flashes cameras like this anymore. It was all like this. These old cameras flashing.
This is an audio podcast. Nobody can see you anyway.
Pushing their finger down on the button.
And they were cameras flashing and people cheering, and it goes right up to Duncan or McLeod sitting in the top of the stands there.
Yep.
In such a seamless shot. And I got to admit, of all the 80s shows, I'm going to throw this out. If that's not a top 3 scene setup shot in any 1980s movie, then I don't know what is. That's the couple redeeming things of this movie for me, is that they had several shots like this where they did that sweep and that arc, or that point of view from him driving in the car to get out of the garage.
Mm-hmm.
That point of view with the camera right behind him.
Love it.
Looked like a video game. A lot of sweeping helicopter shots across the sky with a different movement than just you usually get in those movies. And then Kurgan's half face that they did in the hotel room with the girl behind him.
Yep.
And then the trophy room walk where the girl comes in at the end and she does a complete seamless walk around his trophy room. Those are brilliant shots.
Yeah, that bird's eye one.
And the scenery of Scotland is absolutely breathtaking. So you take all of that, and I look and I say, there is some genius in this show. There are some things that are redeeming, that are valuable, that are absolutely stunning.
You stole tons of mine, Corey. That's fantastic.
I apologize.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
That's all I have. I have. After this, it's the downward.
Justin, you said you did some research on that opening shot. Is that what you said?
Yeah, because Corey took a bunch of mine. But first off, that opening shot on the fight, right when you're introduced to Connor, because I thought, okay, they don't have drones. They're not going to have a helicopter in a stadium. It's too much of a sweeping shot to be on a crane. So I'm like, how did they do this? And apparently it was before they had gyroscopes, or was it gyroscope? Yeah, like stabilizes the camera. They just had it on like 4 wires apparently, and they like swung it on wires, almost like a puppeteer, from what I understand, and just like swung it across the arena and up into Connor's face. And yeah, that was really neat. Like, as far as I know from what I read, that was one of the first times that it had been done at that scale. Yeah. I wonder how many takes it took. Like, if they did that at one take, that would have been amazing. But that was awesome. Yeah,
the NFL's doing things like that now. With that, they actually see. Sometimes you can actually see the camera on the wire. So that interesting.
I'm surprised it's not used more after this movie came out, because that was such an incredible. In 1986, if I seen that, I would have been blown away. I would have been absolutely mind-boggled on that one seamless shot.
You know what was interesting about that shot too is the sound effects. There's like a repetitive thumping, and it almost sounds like helicopter blades.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, are they trying to make us think this is a helicopter shot? What's going on here?
Unless it's the pulleys on the wire somehow creating a.
I mean, I'd assume they would just remove the sound, but so it must have been intentional.
Yeah.
But it was so seamless. It was incredible that they thought of that shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's several shots in here that whoever the director of cinematography was did a fantastic job taking up those shots.
I think kind of what creates it at the top is how this is a good idea and it's not executed well. I feel that way with a lot of the cinematography too. Like, a lot of this movie is actually really, really beautiful. Like, they do a great job. And then between the dialogue and the editing and some of the acting, it kind of just like ruins it. It's hard to appreciate that other stuff.
Well, shouts to Jerry Fisher on cinematography. He's the one that did that. He also did Wolfen, which that's another 80s classic, which I've not seen. And The Exorcist 3. Those are the 2 big things he's done. So yeah, wanted to make sure I got his specifically. Now for me, I had those things too. There's a lot of, I thought, 2 just really beautiful establishing shots of the Scottish countryside.
Mm-hmm.
Helicopter shots, probably mainly. There's especially some great ones with Ramirez training McLeod, like up on the hillside. They're just tiny little characters, like which you see that even modern filmmaking. Like, I thought immediately of Luke training Rey in The Last Jedi. Like, that's a thing we still see all the time. I thought one of the most beautiful shots, and it also kind of goes with color, is that final battle that's in really low light, and for some parts of it, Connor and Kurgan are in silhouette, essentially. I just thought that was a really cool way to do that, with its backlit from the light from the
It kind of reminded me of Star Wars Episode 5 in Cloud City, just a bit.
I
with the backlight.
Wouldn't be surprised if that was a heavy influence on that. Let's see. God, you stole so many of my good ones.
No,
Mhm.
I think that's the thing. We have to
Yeah.
talk about those because they're so good and get everybody's perspective on it.
Yeah, I thought in that opening fight too, there's a lot of Dutch angles, which I always like to see, and a lot of low shots of the feet when they're running, and then it's kind of blurring out of focus once the water starts, and it kind of gives you this sense of paranoia, and it kind of brings you into the kind of the way that you would feel if you were in like a a fight to the death, where you can't quite see as well as you'd like to. There is, I'd mentioned before, that wipe where the camera moves up through the parking garage into 1536 Scotland. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
And then when he gets impaled, there's a bird's eye view of him looking straight down on him, which dissolves into Connor's eye in 1985,
Which I had to bring that up. That was my next thing. I gotta say, and the texture and composition in that was very bizarre. It almost looked like they were filming a screen that was filming that. Do you understand what I'm? Because when it did the bird's eye view and was zooming up, right, and as we're panning back, we're going to pan to his eye. The texture of him was very pixelated, but not pixelated in what we think of now, but pixelated like a 1980s TV,
like a CRT type TV.
Yeah, like it had a blur, and I thought that's too intense. That's too terrible photography. Like. Unfocused to be just a passing thing. It had to have been an intentional choice to do that.
Yeah, I wonder if that's like a wall-eyed lens, which was kind of what they used for that shot that you mentioned earlier, Corey, when she walks into like that vault, and it's bird's eye view, and it's a wall-eyed view, right? It's distorted.
Yeah,
it's not straight.
So
it's
Craig,
not a straight down shot. So.
Obviously not for me, but for our listeners, what is a wall-eyed lens? Just for our
I'm thinking of
sake.
like looking through your like the peephole in your door, and how it's kind of rounded.
Oh, I thought that was. So what's the difference between that and like a fisheye?
I think I mean the same thing.
Oh,
walleye
okay.
is a fisheye. Walleye's a fish.
I might be using the wrong term, but I think that's.
I think it's a fisheye lens.
It could be fisheye. Like looking through your peephole in your door, where it's like closer to in the middle is more in focus. Then farther out you go, it becomes. Smaller. Yeah.
Okay. I always thought that was called a fisheye. So the more you know.
That's dun dun dun. Lots of great angles, just randomly placed angles, seemingly random placed angles, but intentionally placed angles. I think when Brenda's looking at the metal samples from Connor's sword, it's very like an extreme low angle looking up at her, and then they have this zoom in on her eyes. Like this is something important. It's going to lead into something plot wise, which I think is cool. And then I really wanted to point out. There's a couple of great low-angle tracking shots that are moving, like the camera is underneath him and then pulling back as Kurgan's walking. Like when he enters his apartment building the first time, and then when he's coming after Brenda in her apartment, it's the same type of shot where it almost feels like he's a shark or some kind of predator because it's low, looking up, and he's got all the power, and it's the camera's moving side to side as he's moving, which I thought was cool. And really spoke to his character. And there was one other thing that I wanted to point out was when the lead detective is walking through and to go talk to the Marine guy who had the Uzi. They're doing a walk and talk, which is like a Aaron Sorkin type of walk and talk but this is 1986 when this is happening. So there's some. It's a very music video thing. So I think a lot of these things are. You would have seen them in, like I said, a Duran Duran video or several other videos on MTV at the time, but not in a major motion picture. So it's kind of cool that even though this movie didn't make a ton of money, it was probably pretty influential on a lot of different things.
In terms of wipes, back to what you were saying earlier, Craig, the parking garage scene, like you said, where it goes up through the pipes and then it flashes back. There's also a really good one. I made fun of the wipes, but now I need to talk about some good ones. He's remembering back to his training scene on the lake, and he looks like back at his fish tank, and it kind of like goes up through the fish tank. I thought that was a really nice one too. It has some good moments. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple scenes. Listen now we gotta.
He's like, no.
Well, if we're gonna do that. There's a couple scenes where there's some fights and things, and they're getting hit, getting punched, knocked out, whatever. And then all of a sudden the camera we're in a different spot and he's running away. And it's like, wait,
Yeah.
did we skip a page in the script? Did we just all of a sudden, how did we go from he's on the ground and the guy just tried to hit him with a pipe? Now he's running down a corridor and there's smoke everywhere. Like,
No,
where was that corridor when you were fighting that you just took the exit and now he has to chase you again? And so there's a few of these jumps on the camera work that really threw me off. Like, wait, how all of a sudden did we all of a sudden change angles and we're over here? And the parking garage scene, I did rewind that because there's one point I wasn't sure who was doing the flips down the parking garage. Was it the guy he was fighting?
30 straight yards of flips. And he's just like, instead of running away, I'm just going to backflip for like 20 minutes.
Why do I have to do 30 yards of backflips and the guy's 50 yards away from me?
Because it looks cool.
You throw a back out, all of a sudden you're done. You're over.
Unnecessary expenditure of energy.
Yes.
That's
I guess you're immortal though, so who cares?
Yeah, but you saw his sword. He's pretentious. That's Facile. He's right. That's where we're going.
But then we pan over to Connor walking between two cars because he lost his sword, and the guy is all of a sudden walking between two cars too.
Yeah,
it's like he did 30 yards of backflips away, and then bam, he's right here next to us. And I thought they must have skipped a page in filming. But
no, I actually I have that
throw me off.
I have that all over my notes. So I watched this on. Okay, whenever we watch a movie for one of these episodes, I go online and see if I can find it for free because I'm cheap. And then if I can't find it streaming anywhere, I'll end up buying it, or I might already own it. But this one is streaming just about anywhere. Like if you sneeze, this thing is going to be streaming in front of you. Like it's
nobody's
just
renting it.
Yeah, but so the first place I saw it was on Pluto TV, and I'm like, I don't really ever watch anything on Pluto TV. I'll try it. Pluto TV is kind of janky. It kind of has like commercial breaks in really weird spots, and then it never quite puts you back to where you were streaming it originally. Like it moves you around. So I kept thinking my streaming app was off, like something was going on. So I'd have to rewind, and I have to be like, okay, am I skipping like 3 or 4 minutes because the dialogue doesn't seem to match, or the fight scene doesn't seem to match, or Connor just stabs himself to show that he's immortal. Now all of a sudden the girl wants to kiss him.
That's always been that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't know. Line. I'm like, okay, I missed something here. Great
pickup line. Yeah. Corey, how did you watch it?
Did you watch it? I watched it on Peacock.
Oh, okay. So you didn't watch it. You didn't have commercials or anything then?
No, yeah. And
because I watched it on Crackle and it's the same deal as Pluto.
No, I watched it on Peacock, and you would thought that there was commercials with how much things were jumping back.
It was so confusing. Yeah, geez.
Okay.
So I'm glad I was not the only one, because sometimes I just wonder, am I stupid?
Nope. No.
Thank you, Corey. Craig, you can just you can go die.
Pound sand.
No, but listen, I will say, again, I did not like the movie, but there are some brilliant things in this movie that show it's okay to say a movie was not good or a movie was not necessarily enjoyable, but look and find some kind of champion parts of it that you look at and say, this was not a championship movie, but there's a lot of champion pieces in here that were really good. Some of these shots were absolutely top of the line for the 80s. And I would say even a few parts that are absolutely within a top 5 category of a scene or a sweep or a shot in any movie in the 80s, it would stand up against for that particular scene or how they introduce it.
Yeah. So
I agree, but it's like a couple weeks ago when we watched Big Trouble in Little China, it had elements that were all really good. Same with this movie. It has elements that are all really good, but then when you put it all together, it just doesn't quite work. It just feels weird.
Big Trouble's a much better film. Same year,
much better film,
by the way. Yeah.
It's a brilliant. It's close to perfect.
Agree to disagree on that still, but we won't rehash that.
Check that out.
You know what though? If I would have watched this and then Big Trouble in Little China, maybe my opinion would have been different.
We did it in the wrong order.
Craig, I got to ask you one thing about Kurgan's half face in the hotel room with the girl behind him.
Yeah.
It was such an intentional choice, and it was half his face. I got to ask if is there something to that, because it was so contrasted to where he was in focus for that laugh. It was very sinister and dark feeling.
Yeah.
And is there an intentionality that they did what they were doing? And it's so different from everything else in the entire movie.
Yeah, it's very cinematic. That extreme close up, just half his face. I think just about everything they're doing with Kurgan is to kind of dehumanize him more than anything, and because you don't even see, he doesn't even turn around. Like that's when Candy comes in. That's a great scene too. It's like, of course you are. He's evil. He's not. He's lost all of his humanity. So I think that's kind of what you're. And it's jarring for us. Like you mentioned, it's the only shot like that. And I think you're kind of supposed to just be put off every time Kurgan's on screen. It makes him more menacing.
He was
Clancy Brown's fantastic in this.
He's so dark.
I love the fact that he dresses like a male prostitute. That is just the best.
I have some conversation about that later on.
About male prostitutes?
His clothing.
Oh.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about the sound, because I hope that most of us can agree that one of the best things of this film is the music, the soundtrack. No?
I was told this did not have a soundtrack.
What?
Did it have a full soundtrack?
Okay, well, I'm talking about the music
one, I guess.
The music that is featured in the film.
Okay, yes. Now, the Queen anthem in the beginning.
Yes.
What was the name of that again?
Princes of the Universe. Plays over the opening credits.
That threw me off when it first started. But
so
here's
amazing.
the thing. Oh. It is an epic ballad. Ballad. Queen, absolutely. You put them up against anybody. Freddie, I mean, just amazing. However, I go from Sean Connery reading about immortals.
Yep.
Oh, Sean Connery.
Yeah.
I have him reading to all of a sudden hearing Freddie Mercury scream and start this rock song. And I thought, what? I'm in the Scottish Highlands, and now I'm in rocking out with Freddie Mercury. So
and see, it keeps you on your toes. Yeah.
Caught me.
No, I think that's important though. But I think because you have this dichotomy between ancient times and modern day, and I think that's what they're hitting with that immediately, because that's what all the wipes and all the editing with going back in the flashbacks is. That Connor he's almost experiencing his past and his present at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. So you're going to have these two things contrasted. Yes, ancient things. Sean Connery recording this, and you guys know he recorded that in his bathroom, which is kind of funny. That's why it sounds so bad. And then just left it in. With Freddie Mercury.
Phoned it in.
Acapella at first, and that guitar kicks in.
Yeah.
That epic, long, very, very long credit sequence that they just don't do in films anymore like that.
I miss those a lot. I wish we had epic, long credit sequences.
We talked about that with Blade Runner, too, that was like 3 minutes before you actually got to see anything, because it was just credits.
I'm so mad that I missed Blade. Okay.
We'll revisit.
There are two ballads that stood out to me. One was the one where he stabs himself to prove he's immortal to the girl. And then a love scene's coming because of the violin orchestra ballad they started playing with that. And so then it was very wavy, sweet music.
Yeah.
It's kind of and it's typical in the 80s that's something's coming, right here. And then the other one was the final fight. I thought the music picked up right towards the end of the last 60 seconds of that fight, that you knew, okay, this is the climax. This is where it's going to resolve it right here. You knew it was coming before it was coming. And so I thought the music was the good foreshadowing to kind of tell you what's taking place. They did a good job with some of the music.
I was surprised. I'm with Craig. I quite enjoyed all the Queen in there. Maybe because it just amped up the 80s vibe. But I was surprised they were able to get so much Queen, because many of these songs were recorded for this movie.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would have been a tough get with the popularity of Queen and the
in some of the
unproven
videos?
Popularity of this movie.
Yeah, they made music videos out of this too, though. So it's kind of a two for one.
That's
so
crazy.
I mean, there's the album A Kind of Magic by Queen features a lot of these songs, and so it's kind of a two for yes, it seems like it'd be kind of a tough get, but at the same time, it's like they're promoting an album by doing this, and so had the movie been a bigger hit, then the album probably would have been able to ride its coattails. Probably went the other way around, right? People watched the movie because they were fans of Queen. The song "Who Wants to Live Forever" is beautiful and haunting. Love that so much. They play that a lot, especially during with Heather when she's aging. That kind of montage of there.
Yeah, that was a really good song ruined by some terrible acting, unfortunately. I'm sorry. I need to be nicer.
I thought when they had that final that review, I had this for a little later on, but it's not under makeup and stuff. And in the makeup's, it's okay. It's whatever. It is what it is. I thought didn't pull me out of the movie, but when she turned around and like you saw how much she had aged, that was kind of just a little bit of a gut punch of because he hasn't, and you just assume it's all happening during the same time, but it's been decades that they've been living this way. I did want to mention too. I should be remiss if I did not. Michael Kamen is the one who did the orchestration for this. So we think the soundtrack is just Queen. That's kind of the way that this movie kind of sits there. But he's the guy who did Die Hard and the Lethal Weapon movies. And you can hear that especially in the opening garage fight scene with the strings. It gets really tense. If you listen back to it, you're like, that sounds like it could be right out of any one of those movies. So his work is, I think it's really good. It's solid, but it's kind of overshadowed by the Queen music, which is also used diegetically too. Like you have Give Me the Prize is playing in Kurgan's car, and then Hammer to Fall is playing in the Marine's car right before. That's the guy who shoots him with the Uzi and then gets impaled for his trouble. Some diegetic bagpipes too, because it's Scotland.
The most powerful part of the sound was no sound at all in the final fight when they fell through the window onto the warehouse. And for about 90 seconds to a minute, 2 minutes there, that fight, just the swords and them grunting and swinging swords and stuff was the only sound you heard. And it stood out to me because it was so quiet. And it was fantastic. I loved it because we were on the skyscraper above with the silver cup logo.
Yep.
And they fall in through that with the water. And then they're fighting in the warehouse and it's silent. No music, no background, just them stepping in, ching, ching, like hitting swords. That was kind of cool. I actually admit, I thought, wow, that's nice that it's a quiet and we're focused on just the silence of the fight in here.
Yeah, and if I had to guess, I bet that part was actually scored and they just chose not to have music there.
Oh.
Which sometimes
I think
it
worked.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think like David Collins talks about this with Empire Strikes Back too, on the soundtrack show, which is another great podcast. That's the Vader Luke fight in Cloud City where it's all silhouetted, which we referenced earlier. There's no music there either. It was scored for that, but they left it out, and I think it has. Obviously, with this Empire, it's a completely different, much better movie, but it's the same effect.
Yeah,
I think from not having the music there. Anything else with sound before we talk about the performances, which I think will be an interesting category?
Well, no.
Okay. So a great quote that I saw about the performances, this guy who wrote for White Dwarf magazine said, what the film does have going for it is stylish direction, a breathless pace, and some exquisite camera work. But there you go.
Yes,
the performances aren't bad either. This is the quote. Especially Clancy Brown, and Sean Connery, who are so far over the top, they're practically in the next trench. Love that.
They are.
So
you mean Sean Connery, the Scotsman who plays a Spaniard?
Egyptian Spaniard.
Egyptian Spaniard.
He's Egyptian originally.
With the hero who's a Frenchman who's playing a Scotsman in Scottish Highlands.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, now I got
it. You know what being said, what I love though is in the police station, that line where the officer goes, "You talk funny, Nash, where are you from?" Yeah. And he says, "Lots of different places." Like with that one line right there, you can kind of explain away all of the bad accents. Like these guys are immortal. Yes. They pick up their accents from everywhere.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Lots of different places.
I totally buy it. That was a great yes.
That's actually that's a payoff with that line.
Yeah.
Yep.
Love it. That whole scene.
It works.
So other quotes that we want to pull from.
Oh, I didn't mean to jump sections there. I just thought that was relevant to
that's
the
basically
acting.
where we were. So no, it was perfect.
I love the quote by Corrigan. It's better to burn out than to fade away.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a great
Def
quote.
Leppard, baby.
It's just funny. He yells it in the church, and I just thought, oh my gosh, this guy is so damaged, and he's over the top. Exactly. He's so far over the top, he's in the next trench, but it was a great line, and it's better to burn out than to fade away. It's actually a pretty good quote.
I mean, thematically, as an immortal,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Maybe he's feeling a little sad that he didn't burn out. He didn't burn out. I don't know. That's a real.
I know he burned out far.
Kurgan reminded me a little bit of Roy from Blade Runner.
Mhm.
Just in the way he was burning out, like Roy at the end of Blade Runner was doing the same thing. He was kind of going crazy. He'd lost his humanity, and he was kind of back and forth. I think Blade Runner did it better, but that's just me.
Oh well, yeah,
That's debatable.
Roy Batty's a redeemable character, and from a certain point of view, where Kurgan is just straight up evil.
Yeah.
Justin, did you have a line that you wanted to line or two that you wanted to bring in?
Well, I mean, the one I just shared, lots of different places.
Yeah.
There's another one in the police station that I won't utter on this podcast here. That was quite funny, but
Yeah,
we'll skip that.
I know.
I enjoy the back and forth between Ramirez and Connor, especially when Connor is on the boat, freaking out because he cannot swim, and he tells Ramirez, he says, "You look like a woman, you stupid haggis." Which
What is haggis? And then having to explain to Connery what haggis is, that was kind of that took me out of the film a tiny bit. I have this one, and this could almost work as a teacher quote to a student. Almost, you have the manners of a goat, and you smell like a dung heap. And you have no knowledge whatsoever of your potential.
That was good.
I think it's a great line though when he's talking, because Connor's complaining this whole time, and it's just like, dude, you don't have any idea what you are. And I thought that just kind of encapsulated his tough love mentality, because he didn't have to do this. He could have just chopped off his head and been done with it.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting choice that he makes to, for the greater good. Like he's ultimately, they even had that conversation later. Like, would you take my head if it came down? If it's just the two of us, would you kill me? That conversation. And
so, do they ever explain in a sequel or anything why, why train someone instead of cutting off their head? What is it doing for him?
It's very Sith-like.
I mean, yeah, there is a little bit. I think he talks a lot about Kurgan and how bad Kurgan is, and that ultimately we have to take him out. And so the way I read that was like, I'm where I'm at, and I'm good, and I need to get you there too, because if it's me, great. If it's you, also great. But it absolutely can't be Kurgan. So I need to get as many people that can potentially take out Kurgan as possible. That's
enemy of my enemy is my friend, kind of.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Because there's a bunch of immortals, and this happens a lot in the TV show as well, who have been friends for centuries and have had plenty of opportunities to take each other out.
Yeah, there's got to be some alliances that are formed along the way.
Yeah.
So I wonder what would have happened. I would like to see this. It's kind of almost like the end of World War One situation, or sorry, end of World War II situation, where we're immediately at war with Russia in a Cold War. But if Kurgan would have died and Ramirez and McLeod lived,
right,
are they immediately now just like at each other's throats? Are they now who's the antagonist, who's the protagonist? Yeah. That would have been interesting.
Yeah. And see, I just thought of something too from Justin, we talked about this a little bit earlier today. Like the movies, the rest of the movies are worse than this one. Take that with what you will. But Highlander Endgame, which kind of bridges the TV show and this one, massive spoiler for a movie that's 20 years old or more. Connor and Duncan are both in that, his cousin Duncan. And Connor sacrifices himself essentially to Duncan so that Duncan can take his power so that he can take on the big bad at the end. So there is that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, he dies, but intentionally like, here, yeah, you're the one. So take the.
Does he not go back to his home planet of Zeist?
No, because that doesn't count. They took that out. That's in the director's cut. Yeah, that
Talk
was
about the worst retcon of all time. Okay.
Yeah, see, in the second one, what's it? Highlander 2, The Quickening.
It's terrible.
The theatrical edition, there's a prologue where they're aliens from another planet.
Oh, no. Nope.
But then been since don't like that at all. But since there's a director's cut that removes all of that.
It's kind of very obvious about how that's
really stupid.
That's the struggle of a sequel in anything is when you hand off one thing from one director to the next director.
Well, that's McKay too, though.
Entirely different vision.
But see, it's the
same.
Both like it's both. Yeah, I would have thought the same thing, Corey. That's why I wanted to stop you because I did that myself. I was like, that's just totally what happened.
You ruined my punchline because I was also going to say that also happened in Star Wars Episode 7 to 8, but that I just can't.
And back to 9. Yeah, no, you're not wrong on your point. It just makes it even more surprising that it happened in this series. Because then the third movie is actually kind of an alternate sequel.
Yeah,
it's a mess. It's like the X-Men movies. But anyway, I digress.
I got a line. All right, I got one more dialogue because you didn't come to me yet.
Well, you stole my best one.
I'm going to say it, my Scottish accent. Every man dies, not every man truly lives.
That's from Braveheart.
Now, wait. I got a joke here. Okay. That's the line from Braveheart, and it works. It's beautiful. It's masterful. Now, the worst line in this whole movie was when the girl says to him, after they just made love, most people are afraid to die. You're afraid to live. And it was so cheesy how she delivered it. It was on the street in New York, and I thought, oh my gosh, this was terrible.
I mean,
it was a Braveheart line. It is. I mean, it's the Braveheart line said in just a slightly different way, and it did not have any of the punch or the power. It was, and some of that might have been her delivering it versus the hero delivering it, but. Anyway, it stood out. It stood out in my head as a quote that I needed to bring up.
Yeah,
the amount of like sexual tension between McLeod and Rachel, like Ramirez and McLeod had more sexual tension than those two. That forest scene, with Ramirez and McLeod, where he like kills him. Yeah, he falls over and he like picks him up. Yeah. I honestly thought they were gonna kiss. Like they were. It was getting spicy. I could sense it.
Well, romantic chemistry or not, Connery and Christopher Lambert do have they have excellent chemistry together.
Well, and they really do. Connery, who doesn't love Sean Connery?
Freaking Sean Connery. So
he's the Ryan Reynolds of the past, right? Like he's
wow.
That's where he's at.
You should see Justin's face right now.
He is the Ryan Reynolds of the 70s and 80s.
I've never been so offended right now.
Oh wow.
Oh. I love Ryan Reynolds, but I love Sean Connery too. It's the accent.
I feel like I have to make some disclosures at this moment right now. I have a huge man crush on Ryan Reynolds. I may or may not have a giant cardboard cutout of Ryan Reynolds in my classroom. I may or may not have a picture of me in a wedding dress next to Ryan Reynolds. It's actually Blake Lively, but it's my head cropped on Blake Lively. Anyway, so how dare you, sir?
How have we not done a Ryan Reynolds movie yet, Justin?
I would probably have to excuse myself. I just don't think I could maintain any sort of professionalism.
You need to do Free Guy. That was great. All right.
Okay, I want to talk about just a couple things, body language, costumes, and all that stuff. I did want to mention like the sword fighting. We've talked a little bit about that. That is, I think, probably one of the best things in this core. You kind of mentioned that a little bit too. Bob Anderson, who did the fight choreography for Empire for Star Wars, and he was the Darth Vader stunt double. Like, is the one who trained Christopher Lambert for that. Who also had a dialect coach who did an okay job, I guess. Trying to get him to
for a guy that doesn't speak English, he phoned it in. He did a pretty good job.
No, he did. He was doing his best. I mean, the guy he forgot he's blind. He needed to have glasses, and he couldn't speak English, and he pushed through. God bless him.
Have any of you seen Mortal Kombat? Like
he's the worst 90s. Part of that.
I like him in Mortal Kombat.
For Christopher Lambert blasting. No, don't just.
I loved him in Mortal Kombat. I thought he was fantastic.
Oh,
that was. All right, I want to talk about costumes. Yeah, we could.
Let's talk about costumes.
Okay, I really do actually like the idea of the trench coat for McLeod. I think that's really smart, so that he can hide his sword in there.
Yep.
But it always kind of cracks me up that he's wearing jeans and tennis shoes. Like that look is pretty easy to do for Halloween, I suppose, but it just doesn't quite work.
He just feels
but-
like such a dad. It's a dad look.
kind of. But I wanted to talk about the Kurgan mainly. When we first meet him, so he's got that skull helmet, which clearly, like, he's been killing dudes, and then he's got this gold armor that's fringed with fur because he's a mercenary, right? He's been paid off to kill all these people. And then what I thought was interesting, so then he's in this like biker punk thug, or as Justin said, male prostitute garb. I think it's interesting that it's leather, and so that it's still animal skins.
Oh.
And
I
then-
really liked his like skull outfit. I wish we would have seen a little bit more than that of that. It reminds me, there's a character in Willow. I think his name is Kale.
Yeah, it is.
Who kind of
Named
has
after
like that skull.
Yeah, named after Pauline Kael, the film critic.
Oh,
yeah, we talked about that on the show. Actually,
it's on the poster for this movie, but it's not that long. You don't see that costume for very long.
It's pretty short.
I love how his neck is stuck together with clothespins or safety pins in the church. You see that? Because Ramirez almost cut off his head.
I think it's interesting though in the beginning when he's in the Highlands, like he has so much armor on his body, but nothing around his neck. You think if his goal was not to have his head chopped off, why go with armor at all, right?
Yeah.
You should just wear like a chainmail turtleneck or something, right?
Yeah. Right. I also want to talk about Ramirez a little bit, who is, of course, the Spanish Egyptian, played by Sean Connery. I think his outfit is actually really interesting. Like, he's got a lot of peacock feathers on it, and like Connor actually calls him a peacock at one point. But I think it's interesting because it's actually, I think, a distraction for how deadly he actually is. Because he kind of comes off as like kind of a dandy, but like he's a badass. Like he can chop your head off just as easy as anybody else.
Yeah.
He's so super charming. It's kind of his whole persona, but he's very deadly.
Did you notice his earring, which was on Corrigan's outfit later?
I missed that.
Ooh.
He had a pearl earring that was hanging. And then
because that shows up in the second movie too.
Kurgan is in the hotel room and he's got his jacket on.
Oh,
and
nice.
He has Sean Connery's earring is on his jacket.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because that comes back in the second one.
Stood out to me because it was such a contrast for his black jacket. It was a white earring.
Nice catch, Corey.
I was a little disappointed so when he gets into the hotel or motel, whatever it is, and he pulls his sword out, and they have that cool little like training montage where it kind of goes back and forth from him like gasping and sighing to him swinging his sword around, and then it shows his sword that it has like the two like retractable blades there on the side, which I'm like, oh, that's cool. What is that going to do? And then they never did anything with it.
It's going to look cool,
but do something cool with it. Anyway, that was a little bit. I got excited.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on that? Or are we ready to talk setting and design? We've talked about a little bit already. Okay. The one thing I do love about the 80s is like there's no green screen here. Like this has to be filmed on location, and like it's being filmed in Scotland, England, Wales, and legitimately in New York City in Madison Square Garden.
Which calls to mind on a couple things. Well, I will say it may not have been a green screen, but when they were fighting in the castle where Ramirez dies, that was a very different sky. It was painted. That must have been in a studio. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and the way that thing comes apart, which is I love how the castle is collapsing as.
I gotta say, the Scottish scenes are breathtaking in what they show. And there's a part where Ramirez and McLeod are on top of some rock, which is way up on a mountain. No ropes. No, I mean, they're sitting there doing their little sword fight, and he disarms Ramirez for the first time, and the sword flies down. Whoever those stuntmen were on top of this mountain.
Yep.
And was very intimidating to stand near that, thinking that's not level ground they're standing on. You slip and whoop, it's gone. I mean, it's over. The safety measurements in OSHA back then were not the same as they are today.
Speaking of safety measurements, real quick, correct me if I'm wrong, but did they have? I think I read this. the final fight scene where they're on the sign and there's like sparks going everywhere when they hear stuff. Apparently, they had a car battery rigged up and then like a wire put through their clothing onto their swords. So every time it contacted metal, it like sparked. That seems dangerous.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
The set decoration, I loved Kurgan's little rat hole apartment, just in how the shoddy furniture, the bent mini blinds, those little details like that just really show you how much of a horrible little rat hole. And like, he doesn't have to stay in a place like that.
No.
Right? He's amassed all of this wealth, unless he's spent it all. But either way, right? This, because Connor is incredibly wealthy.
But even then, he's staying in an apartment. It's kind of bizarre. It's not I don't know, like a.
He's trying to keep a low profile.
Yeah.
Well, housing prices during that time, I'm sure, are just through the roof.
Yeah, this is just tough times.
That vault that you mentioned, Corey, this time I noticed, like, it's got all those things that he's collected over the years. I noticed Ramirez's outfit was in there this time.
I did not notice that.
Which I thought was pretty cool. It was in a couple of shots. I thought that was pretty great. And then the fact that Brenda has several swords in her apartment, I thought was really interesting. And as much as we've kind of trashed on the relationship there, which I think just kind of comes out of nowhere, it's clear from things like that they're setting up kind of a natural attraction because she's really into swords. Like, that's legitimately what she's interested in. She's a metallurgist and all of these things. And so that's, the fact that this, Ramirez's sword is made centuries before it should have been able to been made is a thing that drives the plot. And that's like, that's kind of an interesting little thing. I did think, when Ramirez introduces himself and mentions that he was a metallurgist, I was like, oh, he's going to be the guy who made that sword, because I'd forgotten that actually he didn't, but I thought that would have been cool. Anyway.
I do wish they would have explored that a little bit more, because that is kind of an interesting connection. Yeah, because right off the bat, she finds the sword in the parking garage, and she's able to identify it fairly quickly.
Yeah. I mean, that's the main thing I had for props, was just all the different types of swords, and I had to just write down what I saw. And it's good. Like the McLeod, the long sword, which becomes the grave marker for Heather's grave. I just thought that's a great shot that's there too when he plunges in. It's kind of like he's leaving the McLeod name and that identity when he leaves there. Mentioned Facile and his his ostentatious backflips. He's got that Salamanca broadsword, which is a really super fancy sword. But I think my favorite though is Ramirez's the katana, that dragon.
That's nice.
That's a sweet sword.
It is, and that seems like a great one. That's versus Corgan's big, heavy sword, broadsword. I mean, the katana just seems more efficient, more fast, more speed.
Yeah. I just think it's cool that you have, again, of all things, you got a French guy playing a Scottish guy using a Japanese sword. But even even if it's just a Scottish guy using a Japanese sword, that's kind of a cool dichotomy. Like, you wouldn't expect him to have that kind of sword.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed though, because the fighting styles of each one, like Kurgan didn't use his sword like a broadsword. McLeod did not use his sword like a katana. Like, they kept the fighting styles the same, and I'm sure it was, I mean, a lot of choreography I'm sure would go into that, but I guess I wanted to see like more respect for the swordsmanship there, and they just didn't have it.
I didn't feel like the swordsmanship was even that great. I feel like if you're going to be an immortal who's lived 500 years, you're going to be pretty stinking awesome.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan, Anakin level swordsmanship type thing. And I feel like the swordsmanship cut was not where I thought it should be, because I think you watch some of the movies, Games of Thrones, or you watch The Witcher, like some of these swordplay fight movies that these people do now is so incredible. To where
I think
this was the 80s, and it was like, okay, we're gonna go ting ting ting, like back and forth like this, and then I'm gonna try and sweep low. It was more, it felt thrown together versus.
I mean, the Kurgan's there's no style for him. He's just all just brute force. And some of it could just be like, what can your actor actually do? Because this was like Christopher Lambert and Clancy Brown doing the sword fighting too. And Sean Connery.
I think it's also just emblematic of the the time period. Like if you look at Star Wars Episode 4 versus Star Wars Episode 3, I mean, those movies are decades apart, and the choreography is way different.
Yeah, it's night and day.
Yeah.
So if we get a remake, that would be something nice to see.
Something I want to talk about at the end for sure.
But see, now that begs to differ. Justin brought up a good point, and that's the part that I struggle with. The last two movies that I have not liked on the show finally are from this 80s period. And it's hard because I'm looking at it with, oh my gosh, is that 45-year lens? 45 years later lens, to where we're looking at that and saying, well, that just doesn't hold up today with today's level of acting and choreography and effects. It doesn't hold up. But if I looked at it in 1986 lens, that was a pretty dang good show.
See, normally I will give action and effects kind of a pass because I understand that we view those things differently. It's the acting that gets me. Like acting, in my opinion, in the 80s was typically like better, like the emotion and the dialogue, things like that. But this one kind of just falls short on that one as well. So I have a hard time enjoying this film, which is why, man, I'm going to keep plugging Blade Runner because I love that movie, and you guys, you did me dirty.
I love it too.
I know, but I was screaming in my car. I was listening to that episode.
I knew you would be.
Blade Runner.
Definitely some road rage. Blade Runner has the great acting. It has the great dialogue, and the fight scenes were like, meh. This just didn't do it for me.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's fine. So let's I think that's a pretty natural transition and down into just hitting anything else on characters. We've talked kind of at length about some of it, but I would be remiss. I said that before, but I'll say it again if I didn't mention that Christopher Lambert wasn't the first choice.
Yeah,
because our boy Kurt Russell was originally considered.
Yep.
Yeah, or Mark Singer, the Beastmaster himself, would have also been pretty good. But
there's
Christopher Lambert,
alternate timeline somewhere where Kurt Russell's in here.
Did either of you guys? Did you ever see the movie Greystoke: The Legend of Tarzan?
That's with Christopher Lambert. He doesn't talk Lambert in that
before.
Movie.
No, he doesn't, and that's kind of it's before this. That's essentially the job that gets him this movie.
Yeah,
and he's great in that. And I think he was probably cast more for his look.
Yeah.
Than his acting ability, but
I think he looks like a great immortal. Like I think he has a great look to him.
I think you just kind of have to just go with it. Either you do or you don't. Like either you buy a French guy as a 16th century Scotsman, or you don't.
Well, I think the 80s is the era of the action hero. And I think a lot of the times they're looking at these actors, and I think this about Kurt Russell and Arnold Schwarzenegger and now this guy, Chris Lambert. I bet directors and studios look at him and they say, okay, can we get a trilogy out of this guy? Does this guy look like an action hero? Put him in a trench coat, like give him some gloves, give him a sword. Is he going to be the moneymaker? And I mean, he's a kind of a cool looking guy, and he's got kind of like the wide set creepy eyes, but it works.
Yeah.
But then he starts talking and you're like, what's coming out of his mouth?
I think he does a fine job with the Scottish accent. He does okay with it. It's Connery, who we love, who never does a different accent. It's always the same. But
because he's Sean freaking Connery. He doesn't have to.
And this is the thing about when Ramirez shows up in this movie, I always forget. It's like a third of the way into the movie. It's like 40 minutes into the movie before he shows up. And I always remember him showing up earlier. He's not in the movie that much.
No.
But he's great. Every time he's on screen, you're like, yes, I love this. And then, of course, he dies, which sucks. But he does, as I mentioned, he gives that, the almost cuts off the Kurgan's head. And then that gives him a narrative reason for his voice, which I thought I'd forgotten. That's where that went that way. So.
And it just makes him such a cool looking villain to just have that slash on his neck. And like you said, later he has like clothespins in there.
It's so gross.
Or cool. Safety pins. Like
yeah.
And he obviously doesn't need them because he didn't have them before.
Oh, and his look was terrible. He looked so bad at the end.
Well, after he shaves his head, he's got like purple spotting on his head. Like what is going? Is it the bald cap? What's going on there?
I don't know.
I
And
would
then
like.
his
he didn't
eyes
get it
at the
all
end
either.
go black. I don't know. There's something weird.
Oh, I wanted to talk about that. When right when he gets his head removed, or maybe it's right before. Yeah, his eyes go all black, and it's actually kind of
Yeah.
a cool look for him.
Like a
I
shark?
wish they would have done that sooner. That was neat.
Nice. Let's see. One thing I wanted to ask, and I think we already answered it. Like, if you guys buy the love story, I think we both said no. And that
No.
always just felt like,
Oh,
he's like,
gosh.
I'm immortal, and it's like, all right, let's have sex. I'm like, what? What?
Yeah.
That's
So-
actually how I met my wife. I stabbed myself in the chest, and I'm like, "Hey, baby."
Yeah. There were probably a bunch of people that were like, hey, if that works, I'm going to try it. Listen, I got to say this. I feel like the premise for this movie is absolutely a great idea, right? The box pitch meeting must have been fantastic. We're going to write a movie about immortals. They all have to fight. They have to die. You have to chop off their head. And it's a tournament of champions. It gets down to one. Okay. That's a great premise. And we needed more immortals, immortal lore, immortal fighting, immortal battles,
Watch the
random
TV show.
immortals that
Yep.
I needed to see Ramirez go and chop off a few people in some epic battle. Bing, bing, bing. And so now I know, oh my gosh, give him a flashback. And, give me that. I don't need to know about his love stories that drew on for a whole bunch of time. And when his wife from the Scottish Highlands was dying, it felt like that scene in The Matrix where I was watching Carrie Moss die with Neo. And the guy next to me goes, just die already, because it was dragged out. And I felt like that watching that scene. I was like, just die already so we can get a flashback to another different time, to another wife later, 200 years. So I feel like the premise is there, but they got bogged down in this trying to make love stories for him in the 80s versus give us an action show for this. That you have to buy one or the other. You can't go both on this type of lore.
Yeah, it felt like a studio note that had to be in there because it was like a long scene too. It's like, this does not need to be here.
Die already.
Yeah. Few more final things on this, and we'll get to final thoughts. I think it follows a pretty natural hero's journey progression. Like you even have the death of the mentor, which is pretty great, and then he has the final boon, and then he's supposed to he gets the final quickening, and he's supposed to, which is weird. Whatever the prize actually is, it's
whose
strange.
line is it anyway? Points don't matter. The prize didn't matter. It's
he gets to like read people's thoughts and stuff now. And
I mean, I'm pretty sure he says several times, "I know everything. I know everything." I'm just like, what the heck's going on?
But he's mortal now.
Yeah.
Wait,
he's gonna die.
He's mortal. Yeah, that's
Did they say that?
He's mortal and he's going to die a natural death and have children.
That's part of the prize too.
That's a terrible prize.
You get to die and have kids.
That's what I said.
You get to be normal. That's the prize. Because who wants to live
you're not
forever,
normal.
right?
You know everything.
And you're 500 years old.
Yeah. I got to say this, though, about that final quickening. And I was watching that, and it was so, oh my gosh, it's like Ghost coming out, right? Like all the ghosts and everything.
Cartoon ghosts.
And I was like, where's Patrick Swayze? It felt very ghost-like. And I thought, I bet this was a good book, but not a good movie. Like, no, I mean that in a sincere way.
I'm laughing because you're right. Yeah.
I feel like they tried to make a movie and make a scene of this quickening, and it would have been a greater descriptor to imagine in reading it than it would have to have it, because then you can hear his thoughts. You could hear the ghosts having conversations and talking to him. You would have heard Ramirez's voice. You could have heard all these things and read those lines specifically instead of getting lost in the effects, and it just didn't come off the same. So I think it would be a good book, but not a good movie.
Yeah, and they got great sound design with the explosions and all of the windows shattering, and like the lighting on his face, and like I was going to mention that too. Like when the immortals they've experienced the quickening, the looks on their faces is super intense and kind of believable for what it is. Like you could have just left it there. You didn't have to do the light show, and it would have been just as effective. You can do that with the musical score, like if you want to make it more dramatic or what have you. But so I just had that, like, kind of moving into world building a little bit, like that there is hints at this dense mythology that's right under our world. And again, the TV show, I'm just keep plugging that. Like it really does build on a lot of that stuff. So if you're of the mindset, like a lot of us are, it sounds like in this show, we kind of like the bones of it or the general idea of it, but we want it to be executed better. We want more of that. The TV show did, I think, a really good job of kind of fleshing out those things because you had all that long form. So I would plug that, and I kind of need to revisit that, I think.
I think as well, and this kind of goes along with like the TV show, which if anything, I think I'm convinced I'm going to go back and watch the TV show. Is if you can all remember back to X-Men Origins Wolverine, that movie, where at the beginning of the movie we see James or Logan or Wolverine get his powers, and then we have like a montage over the credits
Oh, it's so good.
Wolverine and Sabretooth like through the years, like in the Civil War, World War I, World War II. And it's really cool. And I remember after that scene just being like, that should have been the movie. That would have been awesome. I want to see that. And I felt that every time they flashed back to Lambert or McLeod in World War II, or even when they flashed back to the dueling scene, which was just hilarious. I thought that was the dueling scene was so funny. It was probably one of the funniest scenes in the movie. And I'm like, I want to see more of this. I want to see drunk McLeod picking fights with noblemen and then just getting stabbed several times, like walking up,
calling the fight, and like, no, he's not dead yet.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Give me more.
That's one of my favorite parts. Yeah,
give me more of that.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it has its moments.
You could have pulled off more humor like that.
Yeah,
I agreed.
Yeah, especially in the flashbacks, because you can give humor in the flashbacks and then almost use it as characterization to, okay, he is now a more serious McLeod. He's lived for generations and he's like devoting his life to something better, or whatever it may be. But maybe show him over a couple decades of just like depression, and he gets that depression out by picking fights with rich people, and that. Right. I would have liked to see that.
Yeah, that's great.
I think we might get it with this movie's going to be rebooted with Henry Cavill. So
let's go ahead and move down to final thoughts, because we already have started that. So Corey, talk about that for a minute.
My final thought, I think this movie was kind of all over the board for me. It had some very redeemable shots that I would put. I would even go so high to say is in a top 5 category of all 80s movies for a shot or a particular scene, camera work they did. But it's definitely all over the board. I think this is Rob Roy meets Braveheart in Blade Runner's universe with a whose line is it anyway prize where the points don't matter. And so I mean, that's the only way I could describe it. It's all of those things. And it's very, very hitchy for me. I think the premise and the storyline could be brilliant. I think it has to be an action movie. We don't need the love story. We need the more action center on it, because you give us immortal lore, immortal battles, and a lot of fighting, and through that, and then you have a strong, solid hero who's not feeling like 500 years of PTSD and struggling with his love life and not his mortality. So I think a reboot idea with Henry Cavill is gold. I absolutely love the idea. I think the John Wick director brings the action part to it. So I think I look and I say, I will buy that ticket. I will be in the show. Fellas, mount up. We're going. There can be only one, and don't lose your head.
Nice. Justin?
Well, that's just a cool way to end the podcast. I feel like I want to say something cool at the end.
Follow that now.
Shoot. No, I really like 80s movies. Like late 70s, early 80s. I like their style. There's just so much about them. I love like the time period of movies right before CGI hit it big, and like you had to rely on practical effects. So in watching this, I got excited. Like the first time I saw this was probably a decade ago when I was trying to like binge a bunch of 80s movies. And I remember really liking this movie, and rarely do I like movies less the second time. Usually I watch movies a second time and I like it more because I can like have time to digest it a little bit more. And unfortunately, like this movie wasn't that. And like we've kind of said to death here, it has its good parts. It has its really good parts. It's got a great idea. It's got some great shots. It's got some funny dialogue. But you just put it all together and it doesn't quite work for me. But again, to echo Corey, like if it's going to be rebooted, I'm excited. Yeah, I'll watch the heck out of that. I'll watch anything with Henry Cavill in it, because he's great. But no, I mean, at the very least, it's fun to make fun of. So I'll take it.
Yeah, I just want to echo that too. Like, bring me the reboot as soon as possible. I'm sad that I'm not going to get any more Superman from Henry Cavill, but if I could get a Highlander trilogy from the makers of John Wick with that style of action and that type of cinematography, yeah, I would like that very much. This, I think, is ripe for the idea is solid. And so I think it's ripe for. I would have no problem with a reboot for this. I think it's time.
I can't think of any other franchise that like people are like, yeah, give me a reboot. Like, who's excited for?
Yeah,
yeah.
But I think that speaks to the quality of the idea.
Yeah,
which again, like going back to one of my original thoughts was like it felt like a cool concept. Like if you read the back of the DVD or whatever, you're like, oh, this is going to be amazing.
Yeah,
and then it just doesn't quite, for whatever reason, if it's studio interference, if it's budget, if it's the time period it was made in, they didn't have the ability to pull things off. It's casting, whatever. Like, so because how many different choices have to be made in putting a film together? 1 million.
Yeah.
Maybe they nailed 900, million of them, 900,000 of them, whatever, and they missed on a tiny percentage, but those stick out.
I think it's just this is a phenomenal. I think it's a phenomenal storyline arc to explore. I just think it was not explored the right way. I think the love story bogged it down. Not enough immortals or immortal lore. And the sequel tried to retcon that stuff. And that was, but that's the problem. That's the problem. They knew they had to go into the lore and they didn't. And that showed they didn't have a plan for that.
Yeah.
If at any point your lore includes aliens, just stop.
The moment you say
get some help,
if Sean Connery yelled "People of the planet Zeist," you're kind of like, okay,
it didn't need to be explored. I don't want, and when they do in the inevitable reboot, which I think it will happen. Sounds like it is. I hope they don't get into how they're immortal. Like, I don't need to know. I don't need to know that. Make it. It's happened for tens of thousands of even millions. How far back you want to go? Yeah, so far back that it's beyond recorded history. It's just always been that way. That's do not over explain it.
They are. You don't need to know why. Just they are.
That's it.
I want to more see them grapple with the idea. I am immortal. How do I live my life with that in mind?
And I hinted at this a little bit last week too, or last episode, is that I completely, accidentally, this kind of came together that we've done a series of movies now with Logan and with Blade Runner and now this and Hunger Games, which is what we're going to do next, which are all kind of about
the value of
what
life.
It means to be human and how you live your life and like, what does that mean? The meaning of life and what do you do with a short life or a long life and all of those things. So it touches on those things, but not quite. And I think I'm going to finish my final thought with this quote, which I love. This is from Rotten Tomatoes, on which this film has a 71%. So again, take what you will. Rotten Tomatoes doesn't mean anything, people. Just if you like the movie, great. If you don't, also great. This is what it says. People hate Highlander because it's cheesy, bombastic, and absurd. And people love it for the same reasons. Yes.
There.
Yeah. That's it.
Yes. Justin, it's okay. Big Trouble in Little China is wonderful.
That's also cheesy, bombastic, and absurd.
I almost feel like Big Trouble Little China and this are, what's the saying? Two sides of the same coin or something. Where Big Trouble Little China just took it to a funny level, where this took a more serious tone.
Sure.
And maybe I'm learning and growing to have some respect for Big Trouble Little China.
Highlander's dual part, which is very funny and hilarious, and you make that blow up for 2 hours. That's Big Trouble in Little China. It's got the humor.
If John Carpenter had made Highlander, there would have been a lot more beheadings. I can tell you that.
Kurt Russell too.
100% more Kurt Russell. So I think that's it. We're gonna get out of here. And as we close, we just want to say again, thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. And Facebook. You can email us at it's X or Twitter, whatever. Email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com or use the SpeakPipe app on our website. I'd love to have some voicemails to play. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend. Continue to do that, please. And support us by writing a review on your favorite podcast catcher. That really helps get the word out about the show. All those ratings just help people find the show. And again, as I mentioned, our next episode will be a review of The Hunger Games. We've got The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes coming out. So we're going to take a look back at The Hunger Games. Send us an email or voicemail about your favorite moments from The Hunger Games, and we'll share it on the next episode.